Hi there, this is my commentary on Chapter 31 of Lila, An Inquiry into Morals by Robert M. Pirsig. This is a short chapter, but there are a lot of quotes I want to use, so I'm going to basically comment on some quotes. Rigel had always seemed bothered by something he wasn't talking about, but now it seemed even worse. His verbal language and his body language seemed to go in different directions. So something's giving away Rigel's composure, and we know Rigel values being composed. You can sort of tell under the surface, something's bubbling probably. If we're looking at him as the archetype of the social level, let's say, the Victorian, probably wanting to, maintaining composure is extremely important to him, and stepping out of line is something he doesn't want to do, so he seems bothered all the time. And he's also bothered by Lila, and Lila's bothered by him. They're bothered by each other in different ways, and so far we don't really know the whole story of their relationship, but I believe this chapter, the large focus of this chapter, is their relationship. And it's not conclusive because Phaedrus obviously is not telling this story, has not been telling the story from the omniscient point of view. So we can only come to conclusions based on what is told to us, the same way as what is told to Phaedrus. But there are some interesting conclusions that you can hypothesize, or there are interesting possibilities that can be hypothesized from what we've learned, and what we're going to learn in this chapter. You remember that you said Lila has quality, Rigel said. That's right. Would you mind telling me how you came to that conclusion? Oh, for God's sake, Phaedrus thought. It wasn't a conclusion, he said. It was a perception. How did you come to it? I didn't come to it. Will Rigel understand what Phaedrus is trying to say? That there is something about Lila that is of quality, even if it's, say, biological quality, which Rigel would never acknowledge. Biological quality is not quality to Rigel types who see quality in terms of how well it suppresses biological quality, who, of course, as we've already discussed, is the archetype of the social level and the Victorian, let's say. And is perception to Rigel even a valid tool for assessing quality? In a social hierarchy, perception is not the thing. Status is. And Lila has none, zero status. So when Rigel is troubled by Phaedrus's perception of Lila's quality, it's not because he's beginning to open up to the notion of Lila's quality. You could say biological is one of them, but we've come to see that a lot of this is dynamic quality that she possesses. In fact, she is a dynamo. She is representation of, I don't like to use the word chaos so much, but chaotic is sort of a sort of good word to use for that kind of dynamic quality. And I think that he was hoping the old version of Lila, the more socially acceptable version, was around sometime during her and Phaedrus's time on the boat, because Phaedrus spent 24/7 with her for a few days. She's different from what she used to be, Rigel said. You wouldn't believe it now, but back in grade school, Lila Blewett was the most serene, pleasant-natured girl you could ever meet. That's why I was so shocked when you said she had quality. I wondered if you saw something there. So there's something that Rigel is pretty much telling us he misses a lot. And it's not just, although it's important, Lila was once socially acceptable, but she was also a nice person, and that nice person is gone. And we find out it's a little bit more personal with him, It's been going on since second grade, and Lila says she was the only person who was nice to him. Phaedrus tells Rigel about Lila slamming her suitcase above him on the berth early in the novel, obviously to punish him. And then asks Rigel, why did she do it? Because I wasn't having anything more to do with her, Rigel said. Why was she chasing you? Oh, that goes back forever. To the second grade, he said. Rigel suddenly looked at him with an almost frightened look. Whatever he was so nervous about had something to do with this. She said she was the only one who was nice to you, Phaedrus continued. That's not true, Rigel said. But we can guess it probably is true. This nerdy little kid, and Lila, this open, lovely person. And that's interesting. She already had like a capacity for dynamism, openness to new situations, let's say, and openness to this new little kid. So imagine the situation for Rigel. Rigel, this little kid, new in school, makes one friend, and that's Lila, this pleasant little girl. Okay, she gets older, she changes, and for whatever reason, maybe trauma, maybe genes, both, whatever, that inner angel that was so critical to his sense of security and self becomes a very different person. And then something happens between them. Did you ever have sexual relations with her? Phoedrus asked. It was a shot in the dark. Rigel looked at him with surprise, then laughed deprecatingly. Everybody has, he says. You're no exception in that regard. Did she become pregnant after that? Phoedrus asked. Rigel shook his head and made a pushing away motion. No, don't jump to conclusions like that. That could have been anyone. Didn't say it was. Didn't say it wasn't him. So Rigel, that big moral upstanding citizen, is kind of a jerk. Kind of, I hate to say it, kind of a scumbag. He could have been the father of her child. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly why Lila's following him around. So through this whole book, I've kind of imagined that Lila's baby was the result of her marriage. And I think it's because the Victorian in me, I guess, that socially moral part of me, was hoping that Lila had at least some evidence of respectability in her life. For some reason, even my social level is kind of nagging at me saying, boy, this mess of Lila. Maybe I'm finding some solace in the fact that she was married and had a baby. So that's kind of interesting how it would affect me like that. But in a way, it affects everyone throughout this book. Everyone is appalled by Lila on one level or another. So Lila loves Rigel for some reason, or is very attached to him, and maybe it does have to do with the baby. Maybe it has to do with him being her first love. Maybe it has to do with maybe her first sexual experience. And that second possibility opens up a whole can of worms as far as her trajectory. And so then Rigel says that Lila wants to come back with him. And Phoedrus is just beside himself. Finally, he said, I think that's an exceptionally poor idea. She's all right on my boat. She wants to go back because you talked her into it. Absolutely not. The last time I talked to her, she said she wants to go south, which is where we're heading. That isn't what she wants, Rigel said. I know what she wants, Phoedrus said. So after their days together, Phoedrus thinks he does know what Lila wants. And those of us reading this book, he makes a really good case for it. And in terms of metaphysical quality, he makes a really good case for it. This is a much better way to deal with insanity, but it's still an intellectual concept, right? He still has figured out what she needs intellectually, but she's not. She's telling him she wants something else. And what is the reason for that? And so I think one thing that Phoedrus hasn't taken into consideration is there is something about social patterns that are very comforting to people, the traditional social patterns. And this is not a thing that Phoedrus, is into. We know that. So intellectually, there's a little bit of a point he's missing when it comes to what Lila thinks she needs. He's been through what she's going through in his own way, so he can relate to that. He can relate to that chaos. And it's almost as if this is an opportunity for him to redeem himself by saving her. So he was committed, and we know the outcome of that. It took a long time to get himself back. And now it's his turn to give Lila the space to cycle through this pure dynamic state and to come out on the other end like he wishes he had been able to do. So why does Lila then tell Rigel that Phoedrus wants to kill her? Well, Lila is given the choice and chooses the devil she knows, I guess you could say, reverts back to the safe social level. And that devil she knows is represented by Rigel. And a good way to appeal to Rigel, to get this man to whom she has a deep attachment, indeed, who has known her since she was sweet little Lila Blewett in second grade, to get him back, I guess, could be also another dynamic in this, is to allow him to address her socially unacceptable pathology with the prevailing cure of whatever he wants to do with her. I don't think, obviously, she's even thinking about getting institutionalized. I think she's thinking about Rigel saving her and going back to that world that Rigel approves of. So you see what the problem is, Rigel said. That's why I wanted to take this walk with you, Rigel continued. I didn't expect this when I came down here. I just came to see if everything was all right. But under the circumstances, I rather got you into this, although I certainly tried not to. Rigel, again, is talking like such a moral and responsible person. He got feeders into it somehow. And as an upstanding citizen, he's being responsible by getting sane feeders away from this socially unacceptable crazy person. Yet, remember, we can presume that by sleeping with his childhood friend, he kind of took advantage of her. Maybe not. That we can't say. But we can say this. Like a good hypocritical Victorian, he sleeps with her, yet looks down on her. It's that Madonna whore social pattern that is so Victorian. And she knows she's seen in this way. Remember, she's talked about this before many times in the book, how men use her, and they love you before they sleep with you and they hate you after. And maybe there's something in her that she knows Rigel sees her this way, and she's trying to get him not to see her that way, get him to see her the way he used to. There is so much that is possibly going on here, and you really have to look at the social dynamics, which is something that Phaedrus doesn't really explore all that much. So now Phaedrus has figured out how to save her by letting her be, and he's besieged by consternation that she's making the wrong choice, that she's regressing. He looked at her. Well, he wanted to ask, if they need you so badly, then why the hell were you heading south in the first place? But he didn't ask it. What changed, he wanted to ask. Did Rigel put you up to this? Who put you up to this? Do you know what's going to happen to you back there? Is this some kind of suicide? My God, Lila, you haven't done one single solitary smart thing since the moment I met you. Do you know that? When are you going to start? But he didn't say all this. He just sat there like a child at a funeral, watching her. As Phaedrus watches Rigel's boat take off, this whole journey and the conclusion of all that problem solving he's been doing throughout this whole novel, thinking about Lila, thinking about what to do about her, and coming to what he thinks is the right solution for how to properly deal with the problem of insanity, and was on the precipice of being able to actually implement this with Lila in a redemptive fashion to his own institutionalization, which was so poorly handled by society. That chance to do something about it and to help her is whisked away. So as we conclude the exploration of whether or not Lila has quality, we should remember that Phaedrus did see another kind of quality in Lila, not just this dynamic, chaotic state, but another form of dynamic quality, a mystic quality in which Lila appeared. And this is from chapter 1. There is Lila, the single private person who slept beside him now, who was born and now lived and tossed in her dreams, and will soon enough die. And then there is someone else, call her Lila, who is immortal, who inhabits Lila for a while and then moves on. The sleeping Lila he had just met tonight, but the waking Lila, who never sleeps, had been watching him, and he had been watching her for a long time. So there she was, so dynamic, Lila. She could have gone any number of ways. She could have gone toward this mystic quality of Lila, and yet she goes backwards. She goes and chooses the most regressive, socially acceptable way, probably because that's what Rigel would prescribe. For some reason, after resisting this for so many years, and perhaps even being close to redemption with Phaedrus, she pulled back and took the path of least resistance because her mother needed her. I think Rigel would have approved of that sentiment. As Phaedrus watched him start up his boat's engine, he felt somewhat dumbstruck. He crossed over to his own boat, helped Rigel cast off the lines, and then watched with a strange sort of paralysis as Rigel's boat turned and then headed back north across the bay.